Yeah, basically, this is the map of Labuan. Anyone been to Labuan here? My God, no one. Or two, at least two, three. At least we have 3 out of 10% now, or 30, 40 plus. Basically, this is Labuan, about 7 kilometers off the coast of Sabah. And as you can see, it's not like island like our Pulau Ketam. So it's a beautiful island. We have buildings there. We have a golf course. We have good seafood. And also, people ask me what is so interesting about Labuan. Yeah, basically, you can get luxury cars at half the price because no tax, like Langkawi. Yeah, those who like to drink beer, very cheap. Cigarette, you want to smoke yourself to death, go to Labuan, very cheap. Because there's also a lot of offshore, oil rich people coming back to Labuan. So naturally, for guys, they must have some entertainment there, lah. So there are some karaoke's. Yeah, it's not dead town. So that's Labuan. And today I'm not going to introduce you Labuan as a tourism center, but then Labuan as an international business and financial center. Yeah. So Labuan was established since 1990, and the structure in Labuan in terms of financial landscape is actually very straightforward. What you have is the Labuan Financial Services Authority. They are the authority that regulates the whole financial landscape of Labuan. Yeah, and so they provide regulation, licensing, and compliance. Here, Labuan IBFC Inc. Sdn Bhd is the company where I am, and Encik Saiful is heading it. So it's the marketing arm of this Labuan Financial Authority, Labuan Business and Financial Center. So why Labuan? Why choose Labuan? Number one is because Malaysian, but not that. Because I know in business you always talk about economic sense. So Labuan has changed a lot since its inception in 1990. Yeah, let me share with you slightly what we have. To start with, I think Malaysia is slightly better in terms of, let's say, the local landscape. When you do business, you want to apply for a company, you go to SSM, or sometimes we call CCM in English. You get a company incorporated. Then those people who want financial licenses, you can go to either Bank Negara for insurance, for banking, financial advisors, and also security commissions, for capital market. And of course, you also have tax regime and many other agencies. Yeah, Labuan is slightly better, not slightly better, a lot more better. Labuan, you have one-stop center, where just now I share with you the Labuan Financial Authority here. They actually encompasses all those. Yeah, that means incorporate of company, financial licenses, bank, insurance, everything is there, one-stop center. And because Labuan is a very close community, it's about 70,000 populations, and you can see their regulators is not here as fierce as you walk into SC, you also feel very cold. It's not that. So they are very friendly people, and they are always open to discussion and interact with the market. So for instance, we have people who want to know more about licenses, banking license, insurance license. So they are always open to have meeting and just understand, what kind of business are you doing and how they can help in terms of granting the license and understand the business. So it's very business friendly in that sense. That's Labuan, one-stop center. If you talk to Singaporean, lagi pening. Got so many agencies pop up. We thought it's efficient, but to get that licenses, it's not that easy because there's a lot of department involved. And in 2010, we actually marked a new milestone where we actually implemented 4 new acts and amended 4 others. Yeah. So what you can see here, the first one, Labuan Financial Services and Securities Act. This is the Omnibus Act, where we put together all the Financials Act, just like what we have in Malaysia, Capital Market Services Act. We actually put the trust, banking license, insurance license, foundations, and stuff like that into one act. So you have there one Omnibus Act to govern all the financial services activities. And also more beautifully, we have, in fact, this could be the first in the world, Islamic Financial Services Act. We have that even before what Malaysia have now, the Islamic Financial Services Act. We have that since 2010. And if I'm not mistaken, this was the first in the world. The first cutting-edge Islamic Financial Services Act. Again, is the counterpart to this Financial Conventional Act, where we allowed a lot of Islamic instruments to be established while the act. For example, we have like takaful insurance, takaful, retakaful, Islamic banking, Islamic trust, and Islamic foundations, which my colleague Dr. Aziz will share more on that part of the wealth management from Islamic perspective. This is very interesting. Labuan Foundations Act 2010. I believe you would be very familiar with like Yayasan or some foundation here in Malaysia. Yeah, like Kwok Foundation, Lim Foundation, Yayasan Selangor and stuff. So those are foundation, and not only limited to Malaysia, but in Singapore, Hong Kong, and the whole part of Asia, foundation typically is only limited to philanthropic activities. You can't use foundation for anything besides charity. But in Labuan, Dr. Aziz will share with you later, it actually can be used for all lawful activities. That means you can have your personal private foundation, Tanakau Foundation, Ahmad Foundation, Sami Foundation, to house and protect your own wealth. And it can also be used for investment and for SPV and any other things that you can think of, as long as it's lawful. Yeah. So that is foundation. In Malaysia, foundation is governed by either Societies Act, or depending how you formed it, or it could be company limited by guarantee. But in Labuan, only place in Asia, not even in Hong Kong and Singapore, we actually have an act to govern this foundation. So that gives more clarity. In fact, in your business, like where you encounter day to day, you can actually have a company holding a foundation, not an issue. Company holding a foundation, for instance, ESOS, yeah, staff share put into foundations for the benefit of staff, you can do that. The founder can actually, the business owner can actually also set up a foundation to hold the company's share and remain some control over that. I will not touch the structure of foundation too much. I leave it to my colleague later on. But in between, if you have any question, please feel free to ask me. Yeah. I think this, a lot of you would be aware of limited liability partnership, which was implemented somewhere last year, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think so in Malaysia now you have limited partnership, right? Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, you don't have, right, in Malaysia. So this is again another piece of legislation which is very useful, and it's only first initiated in Labuan. Basically, the differences of in short, limited partnership LP and limited liability partnership is basically limited liability partnership. I think you guys will be very familiar. Each of the partners is actually liable and able to run the business. Limited partnership, you only have one GP, general partners, who runs it, and the rest of the partner actually limited their liability to the portion they put in. So that makes it a very ideal vehicle to be used for private equity. Yeah. So if you have any business which need that kind of structure, come to Labuan, talk to us. Labuan Business Activity Tax, I will share more later on that. And then we have the Labuan Financial Services Authority Act, which provide the framework for Labuan Authority to work on. Labuan Trust, I think you guys will be familiar with Malaysian Trust. And then Labuan Companies Act, which is separated from what we have Companies Act in Malaysia. Okay, so far? Feel free, because I think it's we don't have many people here, so let's make it more interactive. If you have any questions, just feel free to ask. If you shy, want to keep it to the end and hide somewhere, meet me outside, that is okay, perfectly okay with me also. Yeah. We have about 97 offshore, so-called offshore center in this world. And why Labuan? Yeah. Number one is Labuan is a good boy. In the sense that, when people talk about financial offshore, not many use financial center. Only recently they tend to associate themselves away from offshore. I believe most of you would have heard of last time they call it tax haven financial offshore center and all that kind of name, which give a very bad connotations, as though as they want to have total secrecy. Money launderers go there, mafias go there. So not with Labuan at least. We are the good boys, as you can see here. We comply to all these international bodies standard sets. For instance, OECD has been very actively going around knocking on all the offshore's door and see who are the good boys, who are the bad boys. Believe it or not, Singapore and Hong Kong at once fall into grey lists. And it's because they don't comply. Of course, then because of this OECD is so prominent, then quickly they comply it. And Labuan has always been in the good book. There was one incident whereby a lot of people asked, they somehow remember, Labuan was blacklisted once. The case is actually just one staff actually delayed in submitting that form replying to OECD. So it was blacklisted for 1 week. Then after that, when we submit it, then everything is okay. Even this year, we have a peer review. Again, Labuan meets all the requirements. We are considered as largely complies, which is the highest level. Yeah. So don't feel shy to use Labuan. And FATF, in accounting lines, in compliance line, I think a lot of people are very concerned when you do international business. This US Matsale always, strong arms. They try to push their way around. They want to have all these standards. FATF basically is for anti-money laundering. Yeah. And though Malaysia is not part of FATF, but we are the signatory for APG, Asia Pacific Group, and which also implemented the 47 recommendation of FATF. So FATF actually recognize APG. Yeah. So we have no issue with that. We are in a nutshell, like I said, we are the good boys. We met all the international standards. We basically inspired, or rather aim to become, rebrand ourselves, not to call ourselves offshore, but midshore, to become the leading midshore international business and financial center in Asia Pacific. Why midshore? Midshore doesn't mean neither here nor there. Yeah? So midshore is basically this. Offshore center usually characterized by the flexibility, business-friendly environment, low tax, low business entry without any business barrier to enter. That kind of flexibilities. Some jurisdiction maybe you can say is loosely regulated. Then you have cheap and chirpy like BVI, about $500-600 you get a company up. No need to be there, paper company, etc., etc. So those are characteristic of offshore jurisdictions. And then you have onshore. Onshore is just like Malaysia, Singapore. When you want to do business, sometimes kepala pening. Because there are so many red tapes, so many bodies you need to go to. So what we're trying to strive is to have it in between, the best of both worlds. That's what Labuan is. We are not truly offshore because we are part of Malaysia, a sovereign state. And we are also not Malaysia as a country because we're still subject to some of the laws and regulation in Malaysia. So then, like this one I show you, the act. We actually have our separate acts to govern Labuan activities, and then we are also part of Malaysia. So it's basically like if you will, you can say we are like Hong Kong. Yeah. Hong Kong and China, one country, but two sets of different laws. Yeah. So there is intermingle and interaction with all this. Now, we have all these products. Look at Labuan as a mini country. So whatever you want to do, let's say in Malaysia, Singapore, or in any other onshore jurisdictions, you can actually have the license in Labuan. What we have done is for the last, I think, 7 years, when we first looking at revamping the act, we have our team of specialists going around the world. Look at the best products, look at the best practices, the law, and how this law can be used to enable business. We brought it back to Labuan, and hence we changed our law, we implement new ones. So these are the products that we have in Labuan. Basically, I think as accountant, you'll be very interested in tax and also company formations. So we have all those. If you look at it more closely, we also have things like this. which is not found in Malaysia, like protected cell company. Yeah. Anybody know what is protected cell company? So basically, is look at it like a holding company where you have a holding and you have subsidiaries. But the beautiful part about this protected cell company is that each of the cells assets is ring fenced against each other. So it would be very ideal for, let's say you have a holding company who want to do investment outside. You can use that. But at this moment, Labuan only limit the use of protected cell to insurance and mutual funds. But there's no stopping for your company investing overseas if they want to ring fence it to create a fund. The company create a fund and then use the protected cell company. May sounds very technical, but when you talk to us, it's actually very ABC lah. Yeah, so don't get frightened off with that kind of products. And the rest you have seen here, we have it all. And also special trust. You may think this is trust nothing to do with company works, but actually it's not. For instance, if you have working for a company who wants to put their shares, they don't want infighting with family members, it's a family run business, and they want to put their share into a trust, so they can do that, put into a special trust, where the trustee will not come and kacau you, interfere with the business, say, hey, you don't run it nicely or that and that. So they just hold as custodian functions. So as you can see, we have all those products, tools for you to meet your objective, what you want to do. And all this can be introduced or established in Islamic counterpart. Yeah, because we have the Islamic Financial Securities Act to govern it, so you can actually offer most of this product in Islamic version. Now, tax and death cannot be avoided lah. I think accountants, tax advisors, they know pretty well of this. And why I put pirates is because basically, if you track back government to the very early days, that mostly are the pirates lah. So you need to pay tax. Yeah. Cannot run away. You wouldn't even get a thank you note after you pay it, but that's fact of life, you have to pay. Basically, how Labuan works is this. Labuan Business Activity Tax is an exemption for ITA. Yeah. So as Malaysians, all activity in Malaysia, and thankfully we are territorial tax regime. So ITA governs everything. But if you fall under what we define as Labuan business activities, then the Labuan business activity tax will take over. Then you'll be able to enjoy the Labata tax. In a nutshell, very simplistic, is Malaysia tax 25% for corporate tax. But if you are Labuan business activities, you are either paying 3% or 20,000 or no tax at all. So how do we categorize this is into two categories. If you fall under trading, if you Labuan company fall under trading, you get to elect on a yearly basis to pay 3% or 20,000. So whichever is higher or lower, accountants. Of course you pay the lower, right? Yeah. So this the good thing is this, you are not paying higher. That means your maximum tax damage, if you are doing a Labuan business activity trading, your maximum tax damage is only 20,000 ringgit, full stop. Yeah. Irrespective, you will make millions and millions and millions. That's why a lot of banks love us. They have it in Labuan, they book their profit in Labuan, they only pay 20,000 ringgit. Non-trading, like holding, investment holding, treasury, you don't pay anything. Zero tax. So that is that complicated. Yeah, Labuan tax, 25%, 3%, 20,000 or zero tax. That's Labuan tax. And the company entity in Labuan can also irrevocably elect to be taxed under ITA. That means you say, okay, I don't want this 3% and 20,000. I want to be taxed under Malaysia 25%. So you can do that. And once you do that, you cannot reverse. Yeah, once you elect to be taxed under Malaysian tax, you cannot reverse back. But if you are taxed under 3% or 20,000, you can elect every year. Let's say for this, the benchmark is, I think, is about 500,000. So if you're making 500,000, your 3% will be probably close to 20,000. Then you just say, okay, I pay 20,000. Yeah, so it's that simple. The rest are no withholding tax, no stamp duty, and personal tax exemption, which I touch on a little bit more on that. So in a very simplistic scenario is for a Labuan business activity tax to enjoy that, you only need to fulfill 3 criteria. That means, number 1, you has to be a Labuan entity. Hence, any of the entity that I illustrated just now. Number 2, cannot deal with ringgit Malaysia. So as long as the transaction and business activity is non-RM, of course RM can be used to defray expenses like place, salary, rental, you can. But the main business activities are non-RM. And the third one is not dealing with Malaysian residents. So if you fulfill these 3, it's very clear cut. You'll be able to enjoy Labuan tax. Okay, clear? Yeah. Because if not, imagine if we allow dealing with Malaysian to also enjoy Labuan tax, what next is you go back, you will tell your bosses and tell your business owner, achieve everything to Labuan. So virtual ITA, don't get anything. Yeah, Sdn Bhd. Because Sdn Bhd, you are operating in Malaysia, you're dealing in Malaysia, either buy or sell in Malaysia. So your income actually derived from Malaysia. And if you go to Labuan, register it, you will still subject to ITA. Because income derived from Malaysia, buy and sell in Malaysia, you're dealing with residents. So that's why not all Sdn Bhd business model can use Labuan. But if you have a out business, import from somewhere, sell to somewhere, out business, then it's perfect. You can do Labuan. Or once you're dealing in ringgit, then you will no more be able to enjoy no more fall under Labuan business activities. For your case is, let's say for instance, manufacturing. So let's say for instance, a simple model will be you buy from, let's say, China, sell to US, Singapore, or Hong Kong. Hong Kong won't buy from China. Let's say for instance, you sell from China and sell to other country, right? So if that's the sense, and then irrespective whether your owner is Malaysian or not, you can set up a Labuan company and actually do that trading through a Labuan company.
So I just want to clarify that, which means Labuan entity is only for those you're dealing in and out. Revenue is non-resident, not Malaysian resident, which is foreigner, and also your vendor, which is also not local as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So which means in the first place, when we want to set up a Labuan entity, we must really consider where is our customer and our vendor source first.
Precisely.
Right.
So doesn't mean that a Labuan company cannot deal with resident Malaysian. You can, but just that part of income derived from Malaysia, you need to have 2 separate books if you want to do that.
Because I want to make use of what is the benefit out of Labuan tax, or what is the benefit we want to business in Labuan.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to clarify on this part as well. As per currently, I actually have a business in I have a business in Labuan, but happen to we were actually advised by an agent that to have a license in Labuan, but we have a Malaysia trading license instead of a Labuan trading license, which is supposed to be a Labuan entity. Your
trading is trading in commodities?
No, more on inspection and repair.
Oh.
Actually, office is at ASB area. So we are more on the inspections, oil and gas inspection services.
Okay.
Yes.
So we can look at your structure of business, because let's say if you just have a Labuan as a flow through, there may have some tax impact, because now what happens is most of your resources and your contract, everything is signed in Malaysia. So you want to flow through that invoices, everything through Labuan.
Okay.
Then we need to look at that more closely, because then there will be tax impact. Whether that entity is just an entity without substance. Mm-hmm. Labuan basically is to enable businesses like this to have it in Labuan, but then again the normal tax substance, everything should be in. It cannot be just a vehicle to avoid tax, especially Malaysians.
All right, because at first I have a perception is like, if let's say I have a business with a foreign registered company,
okay.
It's just that my activity or my cost incurred, all the vendors is in Labuan itself. Mm-hmm. So I thought I can actually enjoy the 3% or 20,000.
Oh yeah, if let's say your vendors is in Labuan. And depending on what kind of, if financial services is okay, but if let's say your vendor is running, let's say manufacturing, you're sourcing a manufacturer in Labuan, that manufacturer is not a Labuan entity, because most likely that manufacturing will still be holding a Sdn Bhd company, even though in Labuan.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's not. You have to be Labuan with Labuan or Labuan with overseas.
So which means we have to be very careful when
Correct.
dealing with your customer or your vendor
Correct.
before we can enjoy all this.
Precisely.
Okay.
It's basically for financial services. In capital market financial services, okay. But you're talking about manufacturing, because Labuan don't have what we call Labuan manufacturing license. It's still Malaysian manufacturing license. So you're still dealing with residents in that sense.
Okay, but currently we are more on trading actually. We are just newly set up. So
I
we're
see.
more on trading.
Maybe we can discuss more on your structure.
Sure.
Because if not, then they will be thinking I'm teaching you how to avoid
Sure.
tax.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, it's actually very useful, because when you have Labuan in mind, when the business you are in or expansion, or when you intend to invest overseas, then it's good to know that there is another avenue in Malaysia which enable you to do tax planning. But of course, some people will ask, if they are already running a Sdn Bhd, and then some part of it is out business. For instance, they buy from China and sell to some Indonesia, for instance, and through existing Sdn Bhd business. And when they heard about this, I think first thing in their mind is, okay, why not I just set up another Labuan subsidiary and then shift that business over to Labuan. Yeah, so that's logical, right? But then again, if you do that, be careful of things like transfer pricing, whether tax substance, all those will come in. Yeah. So ideally is to have a new entity. Yeah. So we can discuss that on a personal basis if you have business like that you want to restructure. Often for Malaysians, a certain restructuring need to take place before you actually do it, because if not, your Sdn Bhd, most of your resources are actually in Malaysia. So you can't argue, I just have a Labuan, I shift my business over and that's it. Yeah, not as simple as that, unfortunately. Now, there are also some tax exemptions with regards to Labuan business activities. For instance, dividend payout, profit, interest and royalty received, and etc. from a Labuan company, there will be no tax. Yeah. So, same thing with a Labuan Trust or Labuan Foundation, where they pay out a dividend to resident Malaysians, there's no more tax. Of course, stamp duty, all those things, in Labuan, you can actually plan your business activity, if let's say possible, to use a Labuan entity to transact it, and then there will be no stamp duty. Yeah. On the personal one, let me go to this slide, tax exemption on personal basis. Basically, for a non-Malaysian directors, when you receive a director fee from a Labuan entity, there's no tax. Unfortunately, non-Malaysian only. Malaysian cannot. Yeah. But then, because Labuan company directors can be held by individual or corporate. So some people who are a little bit not smarter, cheekier, said they may use a Hong Kong company or BVI company to become a director of a Labuan company. So at first layer, that satisfied what the Act requires, because now your director is no more a resident. And because we allowed a corporate director, so can do that. But then, bear the consequences when next time, if our tax regime change, when there's tax on foreign source income, then that person will have to answerable. And then that entity he used overseas, whether he can justify tax substance or not, yes, that's another matter. For foreigners who hold a managerial position and above in Labuan, the salary is basically exempted 50% from our local income tax, personal income tax. For instance, our personal income tax, I think the highest bracket is 26%. So if you have a foreigners working in a Labuan company in managerial position and above, drawing a salary, for instance, let's say our personal income tax here, 140,000 a year. Congratulations, you already hit the maximum ceiling. You are paying 26%. But if you have a foreigner working in a Labuan company, drawing salary from Labuan company, if he earns, let's say, 140,000, he still be subject to our personal income tax, 26%. But because it's exempted 50%, so he only pay 13%. Yeah. So those are for foreigners in Labuan company. Housing allowance, there's 50% exemptions. And then those 65% of the statutory income of a person providing qualified professional services. Good news for accountants lah. So you also enjoy that if you are providing that services to a Labuan entity. Any question on tax? It's quite simple, right? So the bad news is for tax advisor lah, because it's so simple you cannot charge more. Yeah. Accountant will be when you suggest to your bosses, then it will be great lah, because you save some tax through Labuan. Now, I'll touch a little bit more on Labuan company. Is if you can see, if you compare it to a Sendirian company, Sendirian Berhad company, is very much more flexible. For instance, number one is we allowed unlimited number of shareholders. It's just like Sendirian Berhad, you are limited to 50. Labuan is unlimited. Yeah. And we also allow marketing office in KL or Iskandar. But we have actually set out a little bit more requirement for this. You need to have a management office in Labuan first before you can apply for a marketing office in outside Labuan in KL or Iskandar. We allow 100% foreign control. You don't need for here you need 2 resident directors. I think there is also a changes to allow resident directors to not necessarily be a Malaysians, but then a foreigners but with a local address. Yeah. That's what with SSM. Labuan allow 100% foreigners holding. Allowed to hold investment in Malaysia. Labuan company actually can hold equities in Malaysia shares, Sendirian Berhad. So you can have a Labuan company as a holding a Sendirian Berhad doing business with local. Of course, the Sendirian Berhad with local income derived from Malaysia, you're subject to ITA. But then you lock in all your investment profit in Labuan. So then Labuan is, because it's not foreign exchange control, you can actually have more flexibility. So that's one thing. Labuan company can also hold property in Malaysia, but it has to be directly related to the operations. So you cannot have a Labuan company happily invest in property, like property firm here, then happily flip it, buy and sell. No. It allows redomicilifications to other places. This is very beautiful because you have a Labuan company, you can actually redomicile that Labuan company to other jurisdictions which recognize redomicilifications. Yeah. For instance, and vice versa. So even if your company already have a BVI company, probably doing investment holding or whatsoever, and because you're finding it difficult to justify the tax substance of that company, you can actually redomicile it back to Labuan. Just paperwork, all record, remain intact. So we can do that. And of course, Labuan also allowed work permit to be applied to Labuan company. Only require 1 shareholder and 1 director. So it can be a corporate, it can be individual. Yeah, you can do that. No minimum capital requirement. In Labuan, there's no minimum 1 share, and there is also no minimum par value. So like here, 1 ringgit, you can set your company at 1 cent. Yeah, if you are not cheapo enough you put 1 cent company possible, because there's no par value. Yeah. Of course, in Labuan entity, it's not subject to foreign exchange control now under FSA. This is beautiful. No public information searchable. That means you cannot now walk into SSM and pay 5 ringgit and print out everything, grandfather, grandmother, everything out and expose. So in Labuan, there is confidentiality prescribed in the Act. Anybody who divulge information, you are subject to fine and jail up to 1 million or 2 years jail. So it's very strict. You can't have a public searchable information on Labuan entities. The only way you can get it is through consent, court order. Or of course, if you are involved in any criminal activities, that cannot escape. No audit of account if paid. Actually, it's no audit. Basically, if you choose to pay 20,000 ringgit tax if you are running a trading activities, that means you are already paying maximum. So you are not required to submit a return to the authority. Your trust company can just issue a declaration, say, okay, now you are trading activities, so you pay the 20,000. Therefore, if you don't want to do an audit, you can do that and save on audit costs. Yeah. No GST in general. So of course there are still, but if that and so on. In Labuan, there's no GST. Yeah. Now, let me give you a simple comparison because when we talk about offshore or international business jurisdictions, very often when we as Malaysian invest out or other investing coming in to invest in this region, very often they will look at Hong Kong and Singapore for most. Labuan is because of lack of awareness, so they haven't actually considered Labuan. But if you have this awareness and information, when you compare the three, you can see Labuan is actually give you more advantages. For instance, effective corporate tax rate for trading activities in Hong Kong is 16.5%, Singapore 17%, Labuan only 3% or 20,000. So if you are intending to do a huge capital injection into the company, capital intensive businesses, so as well use Labuan because only 20,000, that's your max. You can plan ahead for future growth. Some people also say, some external company in Hong Kong is zero tax. Those are basically company without presence in Hong Kong. I met a lot of people who actually set up an external company in Hong Kong, doesn't pay any tax, but they actually have people and a small office in Hong Kong running. So biasa lah, in Malaysia, we don't get caught, everybody happy lah. But then they are breaching what that external company's tax structure is used for. Yeah. So in Labuan, you can basically have a Labuan company, and then the meetings are conducted outside Labuan in Malaysia, possible. Yeah. So that is very helpful. And as accountant, I think you will appreciate this point. Double tax agreement is very important. Because when you have a G2G agreements, then that gives so much more certainty in terms of your tax residency. Labuan have 71. Singapore catching up, they used to have lesser than that, but now it's about 71, and Hong Kong have lesser, 29. Withholding tax, Singapore still have 15% in general, and Labuan 0, Hong Kong 0. Capital control doesn't exist in these three jurisdictions. And advanced tax rulings, you guys know what's advanced tax ruling like? That means you can actually send in your business structure and get that tax ruling first before you actually implement your business. So 3 jurisdictions you can do that. And foreign ownership, of course, Hong Kong, Singapore, Labuan, we don't have any restrictions on that. And in terms of Hong Kong company, there's one disadvantage is they required a resident director, a local director in Hong Kong. But Labuan, you can have 100% foreign. So if you can look at this as at one glance, Labuan actually have a lot of advantages over Hong Kong and Singapore. So basically, Labuan, because Labuan is not a country, so Labuan is part of Malaysia. Labuan rides on whatever DTA Malaysia signs. Usually Malaysia will sign as a country. And for those countries which said, okay, they don't want to include Labuan, in that DTA, they will say that they carve out, they don't exclude Labuan. But basically, it's Malaysia's DTA. Those countries who don't exclude Labuan, they recognize Malaysia. And hence, they got no problem recognizing Labuan, because Labuan is part of Malaysia. There are issues raised when they renegotiate and update DTAs. So when some country, like for instance, like Korea, Japan, Australia, when they get smarter, they say, hey, Malaysia is supposed to be in general 25%, but you have this little brother over there not hiding lah. One island they're paying 3%. So they actually, when they renew that DTA, they actually say exclude Labuan, but it's Malaysia's DTA. Yeah, you're right. So some country actually looking at that. But then again, having said that, the Labuan Financial Authority is actually very aggressively having discussions to actually include Labuan back into this DTA, and giving various reasons. Some of them are starting to show some favorable view on Labuan. In terms of, for instance, in Japan, they say, okay, I recognize Labuan as long as you pay, above maybe 23% tax, they recognize Labuan. So that's where some company actually use back the election to be taxed under ITA to go back to that DTA to go in. Of course, repatriation is one way through DTA, but there is also other ways. Let's say if the investment doesn't want to go back, you can also have what we call a blocker. Let's say dividend paid to a company or a trust or foundation, which reinvest back into the country. So there are ways back to do it. But you are right. DTA is a lot of countries are looking at basically low tax jurisdictions to say, okay, we want to relook at this because you are paying that. It's not fair for a company paying 25%, another one 3%, enjoy the same benefits. Yeah. Any more question on DTA? Happy? Yeah. So this is my last slide, basically an illustration of all those double tax agreements, Malaysia double tax agreement. And if you can see all those with asterisks, they actually have certain kind of restriction in terms of benefits to Labuan. Yeah, you see Australia, Chile, Germany, Japan, Korea, and all these. But efforts are undertaken to renegotiate and to include Labuan in some ways. So this comes to the end of my presentations. I think we are running ahead of time. It's a tea break, right? Or do we have any question? I'd be delighted to take on any questions that you may have. Yes.
Mr. Hiu, I would like to know, say, I have a management company in Malaysia, because they are actually doing the bookkeeping or providing the tax services to the Labuan company. So I would like to know, say I set up a Labuan company, can I charge the management fee back to the Labuan company?
You can always do that chargeback, but as long as it's not fall under excessive chargeback, transfer pricing to manipulate that tax, you can do that.
But the charging back, should it be in USD or in RM, because the company is in Malaysia?
Or you can charge back in ringgit, no issue.
Oh, it's
no issue. Because the ringgit can be used to defray expenses. Okay. That means Labuan company can have a non-ringgit account and a ringgit account. Ringgit account can be used like for pay off professional fee, salary, rental and stuff. They can have that.
So that company is actually belongs to our group in Malaysia. So I can charge to whatever services that I rented to a Labuan company.
No issue, because now it's the Labuan company outsourced, so-called outsourced, or engage the services of a Sdn Bhd company. So your Malaysian company naturally will charge in ringgit, no issue.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yes, sir?
Okay. Just now you mentioned about the activities, everything is outside. That means you are doing business outside. But they said your control and management in Malaysia, does it subject to Malaysia tax?
Oh, yeah, very good questions. When you talk about key management decisions, so when you have a Labuan entity, you will have your own board of directors. So usually the rule of thumb is if your board of directors having meeting in Malaysia, you will be able to qualify for that Labuan's key decision make our Labuan. Because what was inscribed is that the business Labuan entity is in from through Labuan, and we also allowed business to be conducted in Malaysia or outside Malaysia. The beautiful part is because Labuan company, you were required to appoint a resident secretary, which is the Labuan licensed trust company, and they have registered address in Labuan, so it fulfills that key decision is make out of Labuan. But usually what we advise is to make it even stronger, you can actually get the board of directors to at least have 1 or 2 meetings in Labuan, and make sure in that board of directors meeting, make some key decisions. Yeah, so that you can able to illustrate that in terms of when, for instance, touchwood, IRB come and challenge that structure, or some other jurisdiction where the holding is domiciled, challenge that structure. Number one is you'll be able to justify that key decision make out Labuan. Secondly is, if possible, use back DTA to support that.
Just now you're talking about the meeting, is it must be physically present in Labuan?
Not required.
Not required. If I have a software company, the IP is in Malaysia, but they basically are dealing in overseas. IP is belong to a Malaysian. So is it subject to?
Your IP is Malaysian to Malaysian, but
the server is Malaysia.
Okay, the server, sorry?
The server is situated in Malaysia.
Okay, so basically your Labuan will just be an invoicing center.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
There may be some complications because now your IP is belong to Malaysian company, and assuming all your IT staff are all residing in Malaysia, and you just want to have a conduit in Labuan to do that billing. So in that sense, your buy is still in Malaysia. You can do a little bit of structuring.
Okay. Okay.
We can talk later on.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, that gentleman first, then I come to you.
Morning, Mr. Hiu. Can you give us a short overview, right? How can we maximize the benefits of these protected cell companies in respect of insurance for corporates in general?
Okay, not for insurance, yeah?
Not for insurance.
Okay, because protected cell for Labuan is only insurance and mutual funds.
If it's for insurance?
For insurance, basically, how do you benefit is, number one is, like I say, for protections, because for insurance, you will have each cell's assets protected against each other. In case one cell collapse, the creditors cannot touch the assets of the second cell. So in that sense, it gives you protections. That means it's just like holding with subsidiaries. My liability will be limited to the capital of that company, and it's prescribed in the act saying that, you know, even though if, let's say, for instance, let's say there is a litigation suit in the holding company scenario, let's say the creditor actually sued the holding company plus the subsidiaries. If assuming the suit actually went through, he can also take the holding company asset and the subsidiary asset, and because other subsidiaries also belong to holding, he will have his hand into other subsidiary as well. In protected cell, you can only sue one cell. That's it. So you can't say, okay, I want to sue cell A, B, C, D, E, because, you know, this cell A have some dispute or some issue with me. So it's only limited to one cell. That is prescribed in the act on protections. Secondly, on tax, the tax regime recognize the whole structure as one legal entity, meaning to say you have a mother cell on top and you have multiple smaller cell below. The tax structure is only on the whole entirely as one. So just imagine each of the cells make maybe few millions, and the tax is only collective at the main 20,000 maximum. So that is what you use for. But if you look at the context of investment, what you can do is the company have set up this protected cell company in the form of fund, and then the fund actually ring fence with each other and invest into different sector or different IPO or things like that. Yeah. Sorry.
Mr. Yu, just now you mentioned that say I have a company, I build a Labuan company in terms of management fee. Under I think the Labuan Companies Act, there is a requirement that once you deal with the Malaysia company, you need to report to the Labuan authority. So does it fall under this case?
In your case, if you deal with Malaysian, meaning to set new contract enter into?
Yeah.
Yeah, you need to notify.
So if I just charge monthly management fee.
Or in your case it's different, because in your case you're dealing in the sense that it's part of the group. There's only a chargeback expenses. So that's a different case.
So in what situation that we need to notify the Labuan?
Let's say for instance, your Labuan entity actually enter into a business contract with another Senyum Berhad company, then you need to notify.
So it's something like business dealing?
Business dealing, yeah.
It's not the expenses dealing?
No expenses dealing.
Okay, understand.
Yeah. But of course, we always encourage to have that clear segregations. Though the Act allowed Labuan entity to partly deal with Malaysian, partly deal with overseas, and have two set of account, pay two set of different tax, but we often encourage to have that clean segregations to hold a Senyum Berhad and Senyum Berhad deal with Malaysians. So that I think on accounting wise, it will be much cleaner. Any more questions before coffee break? If not, I'll be around. Feel free to catch me in between. Yes, sir.
Peninsula and then be able to work for the Labuan company.
Oh, okay. Work permit, you're talking about work permit and the 50%.
No, I'm talking about physical presence in order to be entitled to the exemption.
For foreign workers?
Foreign worker or Malaysian?
You're not required to be physically present in Labuan all the time. As long as the employment contract is by a Labuan entity, and then you don't require to be in Labuan.
And the IRB accepts that?
So far so good.
But is there any interaction between the Labuan authorities and IRB? I mean, it looks like we have two different authorities dealing with this issue and may have different views about how the exemption should be.
Exemption is given, but if you're talking about if that person, because IRB don't question as long as that person is employed under a Labuan entity, salary come from Labuan, and exemption is given, so they will take it as good. The next question is, you rightly point out, if let's say this guy is 365 days in Malaysia, not in Labuan, then what next? So actually a very good question, because we did, when we talk about work permit, and this is not the tax exemption issue, because tax exemption is given. Yeah, so far, touch wood, there's no challenges lah. No challenge on IRB. But then another issue is on the work permit, because if he residing in Malaysia, he need a work permit. And Labuan entity allowed the application of work permit for these foreign workers. There is actually silence on whether he needs to be physically in Labuan for X number of days, or he cannot be in Malaysia. So silence. We used to have the requirement for them to at least have a resident address in Labuan, but we have since also scrapped that. Nobody make noise. So let's maintain that way lah.
Okay, one other question on the self-protection legislation. Is that a Labuan issue? What if you have a cross-border transaction and the agreement provides for laws of another country? Is that recognized?
Yeah, recognized. It's always, let's say for instance, okay, the prevailing domestic law always supremes. Let's say for instance, you have a company enter into a contract, and then your contract say you'll be subject to probably US or whatever, based on because where your business take place. That contract will be good in terms of Contract Act. But if you breach anything locally, the local law will always prevail. Yeah. For instance, you have let's say give me an example. You have a Labuan company, let's say dealing with fund investment, and this Labuan company come to Malaysia and start marketing their fund and soliciting investment from Malaysians. Yeah. Even though your Labuan said your private funds you cannot sell to Malaysian in Malaysia, full stop. Means you can sell it in Labuan or in Singapore anyway. But if he come to KL and start selling it, it will fall under the purview of security commissions. So CMSA will kick in, even though you are Labuan entity. So then, because the activity is in Malaysia, it's always that domestic act law will prevail. Yeah, even Labuan's Financial Securities Act and some of our acts, if there's any clash, let's say our Financial Securities Act, any clash with CMSA in Malaysia, CMSA will prevail. It's stated in the act, because we are always the little brother. Malaysia is always the big brother. Any more questions? If not, forever silence. No lah, you can ask anytime. If not, then maybe we have how many? 15, 20 minutes break. Half an hour coffee break. Yeah. But feel free to approach me if you have any question you don't want to ask in public. Thanks. Thank you very much.